Okay, so we'll move to prayers.
Thank you, Chair. Let's bow our heads. Lord God, as we meet this evening to conduct matters of business, we ask for your guidance and wisdom to fill our hearts and minds, so that we may make decisions in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and for the good of all those we represent. Help us to consider all the possibilities before us with equal measure, taking time to come to our decisions, and according each person in this chamber the respect and consideration we would ask for ourselves. And at this time of political uncertainty, help us all to unite together for the good of our community. We ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Saviour. Amen.
Amen.
Happy for me to sign the minutes. So move on to item 3, District Council by-election, 24th of October. Received the
Chairman, before you this evening, you can see black and white, something for you to note.
And well, a very warm welcome to Councillor Flores. If you might sit there, that would give us a good chance. We haven't got you on the mug shot list just yet. So I've got an old one. Okay. Any appointments for applicants? And any others? Thank you. Declarations of members' interests. Do you have any? Okay. Chair's announcements. We have mince pies and hopefully some mulled wine and soft drinks after this evening's meeting in committee room 3, which is, if you go towards the members' room, just there. Okay, so moving on to questions under guest procedures forms 10 and 11. We have one question from the public. Mr. Collinsford.
Thank you, Chairman. Joy Noel to you and your colleague. You may remember during last year I requested information regarding a number of matters within Daventry town, namely the fact that the North East Sustainable Urban Extension had not progressed. Councillor Miller's reply stated that the planning application was delayed and expected in October. We are still waiting. My further question regarding the demolition of the derelict St John's Ambulance Cadet Oblique Mosque and landscape the area. It was said by the then incumbent the matter was in hand. Again, we are still waiting. I note with interest the motion from the Labour members regarding climate emergency of tonight's papers. While I accept that this is a worthy cause, I feel that the building industry will do as little as possible unless government government intervention, I beg your pardon, Chairman, deems it a requirement. There is a far more practical project the District Council could undertake immediately: the planting of trees. There are a number of unused, little used areas within the town, and no doubt district, where mass planting could take place. For example, the land between Thames Road and Staverton Road on the Grange, the land between Ruskin Way and Christchurch Drive. and there are many, I'll repeat again, many more where this could happen. The project could be taken up by numerous schools and other community groups within the district to give them ownership and to help save our planet with very little cost in relevant terms. Before the end of DDC, would you consider going ahead with such a project, not only for the district, but for all mankind? Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Paul, for your question. And may I also give a warm welcome to your grandson, who's here today.
Teach him young, that's what I say.
You never know, may well follow in your footsteps. A tree planting in the right places can contribute to both the local and global environments. Council officers and Climate Change Emergency Task Panel are considering the ways the Council and others in the Daventry district may be able to respond to the challenges of global warming. I am sure the members of the Task Panel will consider Mr. Paul's suggestions, and if he has any further thoughts, they would be pleased to hear from him directly. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Leader.
Okay, so there's no questions from members, so we'll move to motion agenda item 8.1. So, Councillor Richard.
Thank you, Chair. The Abbey Centre, as some of you will know, took its name from the old Abbey building in the suburb there somewhere. Back somewhat over 20 years ago, when the old building had to be demolished, there was the danger that several voluntary organisations which operated from it would become homeless. And at that stage, the then Daventry District Council decided to build the present Abbey Centre to provide voluntary organisations with modern but low-cost accommodation. It was seen as a way of supporting the valuable work of these organisations and securing their futures in the area. The Abbey Centre was seen as being much more than simply an office block. It was effectively creating what many now talk about as being a community hub. A place where voluntary groups and statutory services could work alongside each other with benefits for each other and of course benefits as well for their clients. It wasn't seen as a commercial enterprise. The District Council would continue to own the building as an asset, but it wouldn't attempt to recover the interest foregone on its investment from the tenants. The rental income would be used simply to cover the servicing costs. Just 6 years later, there was a task panel formed to look at the finances of the Abbey Centre. It reaffirmed the nature of the centre, but decided that rents had to go up, not for voluntary organisations or anything near market rents, and it agreed that space should be offered to commercial tenants just to ensure that, as far as possible, costs were covered. But in 2012, the council went further, and it decided that rent levels should be set at open market rates. The centre continued to have voluntary sector tenants, but it had moved a very long way from what had been originally intended. Now, this motion this year, because recently the Abbey Centre has been back on our agenda. There has been a dispute over rents with DAC, and of course we have, in the past year, we have had part of the centre being taken over by the library. I would say that nowadays, in most situations, libraries are not looked upon simply as institutions that store books. They're regarded as places that bring the community together, that provide a whole range of services. That I've used the term community hub, and that is a sort of role that makes the library fit quite well in with what was the original Abbey Centre. Well, this motion calls for a review. We believe that with local government reorganisation on its way, there is a threat to voluntary organisations in the district. In the future, they will need to compete with voluntary organisations possibly across the whole of the West Northants area, if that is the way that the reorganisation goes. They will be competing against voluntary groups that have got to deliver services in Northampton, and Northampton has got much bigger problems than we do, of homelessness, of poverty, and all the other social problems that you find in a larger city. How are we going to find a way of protecting the work of our local organisations in these circumstances? We believe that our support can be, in a sense, entrenched by restoring the Abbey Centre to what it was supposed to be. If our voluntary organisations are in the position where, okay, we will need to compete year by year for grants, but we can at least give them some sense of security and stability by offering them leases at prices that they can afford. So we therefore need a reappraisal of the Abbey Centre's role, and of course that's not to include the financial implications of the centre. But let's return it to what it was supposed to be, primarily a hub for the voluntary sector, with space also provided for other advice services. In recent years, in a number of our debates, there have been references to what legacy this council will leave for the people of Daventry after reorganisation. I believe that leaving a resource which helps ensure the provision of voluntary services, and we always talk about how wonderful they are, a resource which embodies the idea of Daventry as not just as a town, but as a vibrant community, is surely something worth discussing. Now, we know that we can't ask the council tonight to take a decision on the future of the Abbey Centre, but what we can ask is that we set up a working group to look as quickly as we possible at these issues to see how we can plan a way ahead. The motion says a working group. My preference is a working group rather than something that is a task panel of the scrutiny committee, merely because time is running out for the district council. We want a process by which recommendations can be made and brought back to the council, or at the very least to the strategy group, as soon as we possibly can. I'd like to move.
Thank you. Councillor Ruggie, do you wish to?
Yes, I'll second the motion, but I'll speak later.
To the floor. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. This motion gives me an opportunity to pay tribute to all those who work tirelessly and selflessly in the voluntary and community sectors locally. They do so often without pay, unsociable hours, some of them, and of course the object of it, the objective, is to make life better for others. In a similar vein, this council has clearly demonstrated the support for local, voluntary and community sector organisations over many years, even through challenging times and rounds of efficient savings and budget cutbacks. Core revenue and capital funding has been sustained each year. For example, £157,000 per year revenue commissioning, about £10,000 for community events, $15,000 for community projects, $60,000 for capital projects, £7,000 for local lotto grants, and in addition, other significant funding awards have been made to voluntary organisations. The capital grant pot was increased by £250,000 last year. In addition, the council was helping to provide a new building for Reach for Health, the same money. It has provided the refurbishment of the Phoenix Centre, again, it's very substantial sum of money. The Daventry Athletics Club refurbishment, and has paid for the successful relocation of the library in Daventry, forward funding for the library in Malton, and help for Long Buckley. Now, it's in the interest of all local taxpayers that the council's assets are operated efficiently and cost effectively. The occupants of the Abbey have changed over time, the most significant change being the relocation of the library, a very successful relocation to Oxford. The civic offices have been accommodating the job centre and NCC Children's Services for many years. Now, it is true, following the recommendation from the 2004 General Purposes Overview and Scrutiny Committee Task Panel report, Council agreed that all Abbey tenants pay commercial rents. In December 2012, when options for the building's future were considered, Council resolved that the Abbey would continue to be operated by the Council to provide lettable space for charitable, community and commercial users and room hire. Quite diverse. The primary driver was to secure occupancy. Short-term lettings to avoid costly vacancies would be considered, but the aim is to move to market rents for all new and renewed tenancies. Now, that particular move towards market rent is really accords with the principles of good estate management. And it is beneficial for the town, particularly a town which is trying to attract new developments, for there to be very firm headline rents which valuers can resort to in order to assess whether a development is viable or not. It's an extremely important point. Right, moving on. Council Abbey rent policy is clear. Market rents are mitigated only on commercial grounds, for example, where the space would be empty and non-domestic rates would be paid. The long-established council community and voluntary sector support policy is to transparently provide revenue or capital funding support through grants and commissioning for specific purposes and outcomes. Indirect support through reduced rents or other mechanisms is more difficult to quantify and account for. The direct funding approach is the best practice. As recommended by Strategy Group, in order to provide support and certainty to voluntary organisations providing key services to district residents, the Council is tonight expected, hopefully, to agree to extend community and voluntary sector commissioning until 2023. That's another 2 years after we're gone. As the location of the Daventry Library, a commercial tenant occupying the top floor and 3 voluntary organisations, the Abbey, with its mixture of uses, is a valuable asset to this council and to the new West Northamptonshire unitary. Now, finally, with regard to a potential transfer of the Abbey sector to Daventry Town Council, the Town Council has not requested this, nor has it been offered to them. And there is a good reason for that. Essentially, the occupants of the Abbey sector offer district-wide services, as opposed to Daventry only. It would not appear to be desirable or even worthwhile for a worthwhile proposition from the point of view of an authority who concerned primarily and focused on Daventry Town. So therefore, I ask members in the light of all this to carefully consider this motion, and after consideration come to the conclusion that I've come to, that it should be rejected. And I propose that it should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor James has probably just covered the point I was going to make, and it was around the Town Council aspect of it. As a ward member and Town Councillor and a member of this town, I'd be really, really worried about this falling to the Daventry Town Council. I know he's talking about a working group and ideas of where to go, but it does actually say it's almost preempting it, and I think that's a little bit odd really, if you're going to look at ways of doing it, to actually just say we'll throw it over to the Town Council, who have already looked, as we've heard, have already looked at asset transfer. And personally, I'm not sure that the residents of this town do want to subsidise everybody else that may be using that centre, which is what would happen if it fell to the Town Council. So I have severe reservations about that aspect of it.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to quickly follow up on that actually, because Councillor Winsley mentioned possibly going to the Town Council. But of course, if you look on the papers, the secondary is Councillor Randall, who of course is also on the Town Council. So maybe when Councillor Randall speaks, she'll update us on perhaps the Town Council perspective for this as well. But I share Councillor Wesley's position as well, particularly as ward member for Rugby Centre.
Is anyone else wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I seconded this motion. I can remember when that centre was built in the 90s, and I know that people in the town really welcomed it at the time, as did the organisations, because it meant that they weren't spending so much of their time searching for grants as they do now. I mean, I speak to a lot of the organisations, and that is, you know, primarily that's what they're doing all the time, trying to find money to keep their organisation going. And morally, I think that's totally wrong that we have to charge full market rent, as we've seen with NACT. You know, recently we had the letter to say that their rent was increasing to full market rent, and then a way round it was to offer them a grant. When we moved to unitary council, how do we know that that grant's going to be available? So then what would happen if they didn't get their grant and they didn't, you know, and they couldn't successfully run anymore? The same with all the organisations. We know that the voluntary sector saves millions of pounds in this district every single year. I've seen them do costings of how they save money, and this council is supposed to be the health and well-being of the residents of the district. Now, as for the town council, I don't know whether they'd like to take on that asset, but what I will tell you is most of those organisations in there, when you speak to people like the Citizens and Advice, it's something like about 75% of the usage is from Daventry townspeople. We've got high deprivation on the Southbrook area of this town. I think it's one of the highest in the whole of Northamptonshire. So, you know, we have got a lot of people needing those organisations for help and support. So my fear is if the grants aren't available and those services disband, what will happen?
Councillor Richard, would you like to
Let me respond just very briefly on a couple of points. The first is this issue that the Abbey Centre accommodates voluntary organisations that work district-wide. Yeah, it's true, and it occurred to me. Daventry as a town provides services by existing district-wide. I mean, it's not just the Abbey Centre. Car parks, shops, most other things that happen in Daventry are there not just for the citizens of Daventry and so on. But I accept that there is a valid point that this has been raised. But surely that would be a matter. If the town council did decide that, look, it could take this over and manage it, it would be a way in which it is free to set the rental terms of tenants on the basis of where they are providing services, about where these services should be charged, how they should be charged. That would be a matter for whoever is zoning it. But I recognise, with all the other changes taking place, it may be that the town council decides that, look, this is a step too far. This would be too big a project for them at this stage to manage. If that's the case, there are many other situations where buildings like this are put into the hands of a trust, and I see no reason why that couldn't be done here. It would be up to trust to determine how people were charged, what the terms would be, how the thing would be operated. That's something that we would look at. But the main thing that I want to stress, and my point has been well made by Councillor James, he doesn't often help me. he listed all the grants, the exciting things that this council has done for the voluntary service. And I welcome what this government, what this council has done for the voluntary service. Sometimes we should have done a lot more, but it is good. But we're not going to be here in a couple of years. Big deal, we can extend commissioning to 2023, but what about 2024? What's going to happen then? The whole point of proposing this transfer is to make sure that we leave something behind for the voluntary sector, that it can continue its work. It is that sort of security to continue doing it. We can do that through reasonably long leases. Okay, they won't go on forever. We can do it by transferring the building into the hands of a trust that's set up for that purpose. But if we simply sit and do nothing, then the danger is that some of these organisations are going to die through starvation of funds, their services are going to disappear, and its residents who are going to suffer.
Okay, so there's no more speakers will go to the vote. So are those for the motion?
Fine, Chairman.
And those against? Okay, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 8.2. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I put forward this motion as I saw in the draft budget of the County Council that it was the evening right care home was to be closed to save them a large amount of money. Having already lost the Grange care home and attending public meetings, and how it came across is that we were assured other care provision would be provided. And while that provision, we were waiting for that to come to fruition, the residents would move into Evening Right and other local care homes, and then once the new care home would be built, they would be transferred and the Evening Right care home would then be closed. I understand that the Evening Right care home has come to the end of its life. I understand that, but it's my big concern is what other alternative provision is provided. I do know of one resident that recently the family moved her out to get her to near as Daventry as possible, which was Kilsby, which is fine if you've got a car, but if you haven't, that's not so easy. Unfortunately, she passed away within 7 weeks. And obviously, it's a bit upheaval. She not only has moved out of her home into another home, she's got a whole new routine, she's got a whole new lot of staff, and there was no ill health. It was just, it's just so sad. I do note that you have obviously put your amendment through, but it's still the point that I was making. We need that provision here in the town, and we need that provision guaranteed. We are a growing town, we are a growing, ageing population town, and my concern is where these people are going to go. I know last year somebody tried to get their relative into a home and the nearest place available was Kettering. Totally unacceptable to try and move a relative to Kettering. If you have a car, it's bad enough, but if you work out a bus route, that can take you nearly 4 hours to get there. So my concern, what I wanted this council to do was to liaise with the county council to provide, provision for this town within this town, because it's this town that would have lost 2 care homes. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Richard, would you like to say that?
If I may speak later, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Yes, Chairman, if I may propose the amendment that's in front of councillors, I'd like to briefly explain the reasoning behind the amendment as it's written. When I read the motion put forward by Councillor Randall and others, I was fully in support of the spirit of the motion. It is an absolutely crucial issue for the town, and I hope that Councillor Randall and others will recognise that the amended form of the motion retains recognition of the fact that extra provision is needed in Daventry town. And in fact, the County Council recognise that fact. We know that there is a shortfall in care home places. currently and that in future that shortfall will be exacerbated. But I thought it was just useful to make sure that any motion agreed by this council provided the fullest information possible, because I do very much hope that the motion will be passed in its amended form. So I've simply added some context to a couple of paragraphs of the motion. And finally, I have removed in my proposed amendment, I have removed the paragraph where it states that the County Council said that there would be another build. There's some conflicting information in the public arena from previous cabinet members at the County Council. I've discussed with members of the County Council myself what promises were made, and it's not clear that there was a firm undertaking made to provide another care home in Daventry. That said, the elimination of that paragraph does not negate the fact that we recognise the need for more care provision in Daventry town itself. The points that Councillor Randall raises are absolutely valid. It's not good enough that people have to be homed in Kettering or on the far side of Northamptonshire. There should be suitable provision in Daventry and the surrounding area. So I very much hope that our opposition will accept the amendment put forward. I would simply add that Daventry District Council hasn't been oblivious to this very important issue. DDC officers are already working with developers to explore the possibility of providing extra care homes within our district. I understand that 6 housing developers have been received and are currently being evaluated in order to extend the availability of care home spaces within our district. So we are working on this matter. It continues to be an important priority for the District Council, and therefore I hope that the amendment will be accepted and the Council as a whole can get behind this motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second the amendment. I've only got a couple of words to say, Chair. Of course, I know the day kicked off today on BBC Radio Northampton with news coverage on this, so it's been a very topical issue. Of course, Councillor Brown also is a county councillor, and many county councillors here have a head on this as well and some visibility of this. I think the point is here we are supportive of the overall spirit of the motion, and of course I also speak as a member, of course it's on my ward, and obviously of much concern, and of course even in this chamber people amongst us have had family there, of course, and relatives have been supported by this. So very simply from me, I'd like to support that, and again I also hope the opposition group take in the spirit which is intended and back our amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. These are the sort of things that we should be looking at. I know it isn't directly our responsibility, but we need to influence where we can, and I just want to reassure the Council that on the 12th I am meeting with the portfolio lead, the cabinet lead, to ask him what are the short, medium, long-term facilities that are going to be required in this district for elderly care homes, to try to get more of a picture, strategic picture of exactly what is being planned, to reassure myself and then reassure colleagues that things are in place. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I sense that there's broad agreement on this issue. I can't say complete agreement because there are aspects of the amendment that leave me just a little bit puzzled. We know, at least it has been widely reported, that the County Council has faced a huge shortfall in providing care halls, at least in council-run care halls. Well, there have been all sorts of stories about people needing to be sent even outside the county for accommodation. That has all appeared in the press. We have heard of the examples that take place here. Councillor Randall has talked about a number of people needing to be offered homes in Kettering, places that are miles and miles away from their hometown, and that is not satisfactory. And yet, in what will become the penultimate paragraph, if this amendment goes through, one of the sentences, you say that some residential spaces are available in another care home service close by. Well, I'm not aware of any care home service nearby. And what we need to be thinking about is not just providing accommodation for one or two people, but for providing accommodation for groups of people. I mean, let's face it, a care home is not just a place with beds. For the people who stay there, it is a home, it is a community, it's a place where very elderly and vulnerable people feel secure. And therefore, a move is a thing that you only do as a very, very last resort. It can have hugely distressing effects for people who are involved. Many of them very frail in the final years of their life. You don't subject people to do that unless there is no way out. Now, there's talk about, yes, that there are more care homes coming in Daventry. There will be one up in Middlemore. They're only digging the foundations now. There'll be one over the road in Wilton Road. But I'm not aware of the contractors even being on the site yet. They're coming. They're in the pipeline, but it looks as if it's a very long pipe. It may be at least a couple of years before we're at a stage where these homes can open. Is there no way that we can find a fix for the Evelyn Wright home that keeps it running for at least the people who want to stay there, who want to stay together? Not that brings it up to standards, but makes it at least legal for it to operate until such time as these people can be moved as groups, people who want to live their lives together, who want to be with each other, moved into a place where they all move together. They move in the area to which they believe they belong and where they can get visits from friends and family.
Councillor Brad.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to respond to Councillor Mitchell's points there, which I completely understand that they're made with the very best of intentions and with the interests of the residents of the Evelyn Wright care home at heart. But I would just seek to reassure him that the County Council does not take this move lightly. It is very much a last resort to move people from one care home to another, especially when those residents are extremely vulnerable, as some of the residents at Evelyn Wright very, very much are. The fact is that the Evelyn Wright care home is very close to not meeting the minimum standards required by the Care Quality Commission. The County Council has done a thorough analysis, as I understand, of the situation at the care home in question, and they see no way forward other than to move to this last resort of moving residents to other facilities, whilst the care home capacity overall is extended and amplified. So I would. Nothing in the proposed amendment negates any of the points raised in the original motion. We're simply adding the additional information to explain precisely why the County Council is taking these steps. On this side of the chamber, we fully recognise the fact that care home provision is a matter of immense importance, and we recognise the fact that we need to see more of it across our district and in the town itself. We've simply moved to provide some further context, and we fully support any move to ensure a better quality of care and a fuller quantity of care within Daventry district.
So, Councillor Osborne.
Chairman, I've been following it with my county council hats on early this year, when the first report started to come out. As I know the Evelyn Wright home well, we used to go into it frequently to repair televisions, and I watched it deteriorate. The condition of the Evelyn Wright home now, because I was all set to go in there and challenge the county council for trying to do what they were doing. And I looked for holes in it, I looked for things they were doing wrong, and for things they could do to keep it open. And I couldn't find a loophole at all. Their listings of the problems with the home were dead correct. The last time I went there, and that's a few years ago now, it's about 3 years ago, I could hardly stand up in the car park, and I wasn't as bad on my legs as I am now. And the windows were falling out. Now, okay, you could say you wanted to, well, they let them do that, but they didn't let them do that at all. The condition of the place on paper is exactly the same as it is if you go and see it. It's in terrible condition. And I wouldn't want to keep a relative of mine in that home at all. As far as consulting people, and I read it about 4 or 5 times about 3 months ago, on whom they consulted or on whom they would be consulting at the time. And I couldn't see any other people that they could go to consult other than the ones that they did. I couldn't pick a hole in what they did. Their report was brilliant on it, and I'm afraid there's no other course but to support the amendment, Chairman, and to get something here as soon as possible that is county council run, besides the many private ones there are around, and there are several private ones.
Okay, so before we go to the vote, Councillor Randall, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. When the Grange Care Home was closed, obviously we were all led to believe there was going to be some care provision, but it was sold to a developer and now the houses are being built. Now obviously the County Council must have got some money from the sale of that land, and hopefully they would have put it towards care provision. Whether they did or not, I don't know. The Evening Right Care Home was gifted to take care of the elderly residents of this town by Evening Right. So, presumably, if they close that care home again, what will they do with their land? Will they sell it, and will it go for care provision? Because it was gifted for that very reason. So I hope that it would be used for that. The County Council was well aware that both of those care homes were very near to not meeting standards when they closed the Grange Care Home 4 years ago. But they did nothing. And this is what I'm really cross about, is the fact that they knew that. They knew that the Evening Right Care Home was of substandard then, and still they've done nothing. They've put no provision in place. And obviously, these poor people were scattered around last time, many not going into Daventry, some of them did. We also know dementia. Years ago, I never knew anybody that got dementia. Now I know so many people have got dementia. I was talking to a lady the other day. There was no dementia care for her mother in Daventry, and she's found her a place in Southam, which again is not so bad if you've got a car. But there are many people in this town that still do not have a car, and they still rely on public transport. I appreciate that you've put this amendment in, but I would like to change one word, if that would be possible, and it would be in the last paragraph. And where you've put this council therefore resolved to liaise with the County Council to see what provision can be provided, I would like that changed to see what provision will be provided.
Okay, so what we'll do then is we'll go for a vote on the amended motion, and then we will maybe then go to the amended motion. Yes, have you got that?
Chairman, may I maybe simply just make the amendment up? I fully accept Councillor Randall's request. There's no problem with it from my point of view.
At the end of the day, Chairman, it's in your gift to allow the business to go freely. I'm just trying to give the rules as they are. It's that simple that maybe you will agree quickly straight after with that fresh amendment. But there is the ability with the amendment, even though it's agreed, as it were, by all sides, by the sound of it, in principle, there could be other amendments proposed that I don't know about. So the point of an amendment being carried is it becomes the substantive motion. It's not done and dusted, because then more amendments can come. That was one, but there could be others. So I suggest you do take it one by one.
Okay, so those in favour of the amendment, show your hands. Yes. So what we're doing, we're going for the amendment that's been brought forward, and then we've got. So if we're all in agreement to that, then we will then, or the majority, then we move to the amendment to the amendment,
Yeah.
which is the going from the can to will.
Yeah.
So that's proposed. So, for the amended motion, all those in favour? Carried? Okay. And all those in favour of just...
So we need to have a proposer and a second.
yes. So we need a proposer and a second for the amendment to the amendment.
Yeah, I propose that we amend the amended to change the wording in the last paragraph to will rather than can.
Thank you, Councillor Anderton.
Yeah, happy to second that in the spirit of cross-party cooperation.
Excellent. Okay, so here we go again. So all those in favour? Motions carried. So just before we move on to any other amendments before we move on. So are you all in agreement that's carried, please? So, final motion 8.3, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say it's unfortunate that members of the other group don't borrow more motions. I don't like the feeling that I'm performing so much. I would hope that most of you would have seen some of the press coverage this week of the climate talks, with a view that there are many climate change scientists that believe that we are reaching sort of climate tipping point faster than was previously predicted. The point at which the rate at which ice caps are melting and setting off and train a whole number of other changes might just put us in which we're already on a slide to something that could be catastrophic for many parts of the world. So the need to act with urgency and doing everything we can to stop emissions is something that's got to be right at the top of our agenda. So, the Climate Emergency Task Panel that was formed back earlier in the year has been looking at what we can do here in Daventry District, and one of the main things we've been looking at is emissions from homes. Emissions from homes are something just over 20% of all emissions. They are perhaps the most controllable emissions once you actually get there. We had quite a number of discussions about how we could actually reduce emissions by making changes to the conditions that we place on developers when they are building homes. What would we demand of developers to make sure that new homes in the district were not going to have such a carbon footprint as homes that have been built in the past. Now, it emerged, and there is still a little bit of doubt about this, but it emerged that as a district council, we are not able to go very far in putting conditions on developers, at least at the moment. But it was pointed out to us by officers that there is a government consultation that is taking place. And we really feel that this is something that we felt that within our report, we would want to make a recommendation about how the district council should respond to that consultation. However, we had a problem. With the sequencing of meetings, we will not get our final report to council until our next meeting, which is in the middle of February. But the deadline for the consultation is about the middle of January. Now, we therefore decided that we should put a motion on the agenda for this evening. Now that motion is there because we felt that this was an issue of such importance that the council should be, the DDC should make a response, and therefore the council should have a discussion. I'm fully aware from emails that I've received that there is a view that, of course, the strategy group under our constitution, has got authority to respond to consultations on behalf of the council. I've got, normally would have no problem with that. In this case, I feel that the issues are so important that I would have liked to have seen the district council making what is effectively a political statement by supporting the three issues, the 3 bullet points in clause 2 of the motion. These are actually the bullet points that are recommended by the government in the government's consultation. But I believe that they are important, and I would have liked to see us sort of moving forward in putting the political weight of the council behind any submission that is made. In subsequent discussions, however, we are still in our task panel at the stage of putting together our final report. We're still looking at some of these issues. We don't want to be in a position in which we might find ourselves this evening recommending something when we finalise our report at a later stage, we might want to move slightly further. For these reasons, one of my colleagues on the task panel, Councillor Frost, would like to move an amendment. I'm not quite sure. I think that the monitoring officer, Chair, indicated that in your position you can look for the easiest way of facilitating the debate which we want to have. I don't know if at this stage if I'm able to pass the baton to Councillor Frost to introduce his amendment.
Chairman, the motion was given on notice, so it's now been moved. It's now the original motion before the members. Amendments are now welcome, and if there's an amendment to come, then Councillor Frost can do that now. Okay.
Chairman,
Councillor Frost.
thank you. In simple terms, this afternoon, Councillor Ritchie and I attended our second meeting of the South Northlands Council Climate Change Working Group, and it's in that meeting that these ideas were formed, and this amendment has been put together at short notice following that. And if I can read that, it's very, very brief, and it reads, this council requests the strategy group in formulating a response to the Future Home Standard consultation on behalf of Daventry District Council. It takes account of a short briefing paper which the Climate Emergency Task Panel will send to the strategy group no later than the 2nd of January 2020. Put bluntly and simply, what we're saying is, if we send you give the simple language, if we send you a side of A4 by the new year, will you read it? But that's essentially what we're saying. And then the reasoning is, in simple terms, it's because the stakeholders of the task panel, which I'm proud to be a member of, we feel we have a duty to them in a sense, so they know that we're doing what we can, and that we're seeking to have our views expressed, and that the strategy group will read what we've got to say. That's all it is. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, just trying to converse. To be honest, that doesn't amount to an amendment in my view. It's rather a straightforward, complete change. Appreciate what the sentence is trying to do. So I don't see that. The other point I've got in my head is about the task panel we set up with the Scrutiny Improvement Committee, and the task panel is to report to the Scrutiny Improvement Committee before it reports anywhere else. So I think there's a problem there in terms of procedure anyway. There's nothing to stop the actual contents or thought of members of that task panel being relayed to strategy group if the chairman of the strategy group is happy to allow that, as he normally would be, I suggest. Therefore, there's no difference in that sense for those members that have an input. I also don't think it's any different to think about difference in weight between the council and strategy group as far as government is concerned. The response that goes from this council via strategy group will be the council's response. Councillor Guilford.
Thank you. I welcome this motion, the government's consultation, not the motion. I don't welcome the motion. This District Council, Daventry District Council, has been a beacon on the environmental agenda. As we've just heard, the deadline for response to the government's consultation is 10th of January. Officers and myself and the relevant portfolio holders that have an impact on the consultation are looking at policy and what our responses should be. And we're enabling a holistic approach to all the questions in the consultation. This report will be presented to Strategy Group. Any member of this council can attend Strategy Group, so it can be there for every member to debate. It's up to the members to come along on the evening. After Strategy Group, that's in time to submit our response the next day. So I cannot support this motion because I think it's premature. At that same Strategy Group, I'm sure comments from other avenues spoken by members can be taken account in the proper forum of the Strategy Group debate. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Chair, can I make a point of order, which I hope will be helpful? I think.
Sorry, Chair, there's no such thing as a point of order, am I correct? Is that? Okay.
Sorry, Councillor.
I'm going to refer to this. I believe that the monitoring officer may have misunderstood the nature of what was proposed by Councillor Frost. Time did not allow us to produce a bit of paper for everybody who is here, but if it would be helpful, I can give to you and to the monitoring officer a copy of what is clearly an amendment to a motion. Then we can be clear of what it is that we're actually discussing.
Yes, we can see that.
Yeah.
Those are the top of
Chairman, I appreciate the size of the motion. It's always helpful in the amendment case. The motion is asking for support, and what's being suggested is not to support. The amendment is taking that away, if you like. It's not saying reject, it's taking away the element of support which is in this motion. It also has this issue about the briefing paper from the task panel straight to strategy group. The task panel is obliged to report to S&I committee. Now, the sentiment perhaps is trying to be achieved the same. I cannot be sure of that from what's been put forward.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. This is to be a flippant point, but I think it's really fascinating, actually, isn't it, that we're talking about climate change, climate emergency, and we've got a panel that's obviously not ready to report yet. I feel quite passionate about this topic because not only in my day job do I actually help to transform the country into sustainable agriculture. Things that you're talking about like COP25, get all that and so on, but this is a bit of a nonsense, isn't it, really? We've got a kind of point here, going over to the officers and so on. Wouldn't it be easier to quickly get the work done and then bring it back through whichever channel it's meant to come, get the work done at scrutiny, and then give us a clear idea of what you actually want us to do? And like Councillor Guildford said, in the meantime, get the consultation responded to, and then come back with some more ambitious, because we're not behaving here this evening like this is a climate change emergency. We're behaving like a bunch of crazy people in the committee, and it's a nonsense. And I think we should take it off the table and move on and give us something proper to look at in a proper paper that's well thought out. This is an embarrassment.
Point of order, Chair. May I ask whether we're still debating the motion on the papers or whether we're debating the proposed amendment? Because if I understand it correctly, the monitoring officer hasn't accepted the amendment.
Correct, yes.
Just to be absolutely clear, to respect your absolute authority, Chairman, I give you the advice that you're ruling ultimately. Okay,
well, I will take advice. So we're moving. Does anyone else want to speak? You've got the proposer and the second. Councillor Dabbs, do you wish to speak?
Well, I was just going to Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say a few words that I extracted from a Quality Daily newspaper, which I'm sure you all read, which is on, Councillor Morgan mentioned the committee meeting in Madrid. And the recent news is emissions are increasing, they're not going down, and with the current trend, we'll be trending towards 3 degrees of heat increase by the end of the century. So I'm sure that our children and our grandchildren would appreciate all our efforts to do as much as we can to bottom down, to reduce emissions. And I think in terms of the timing on this is unfortunate, I think. But I think that we as a council ought to be giving our opinion, if you like, so that the officers make sure that they do the best job that they can. I know that that consultation is quite technical. I've looked at it. It asks for lots of evidence and has to be done by people in the know. But I think we will miss the point if we issue a watered down consultation, if you like, rather than the best efforts, the best that we can do, the best standards. I'll just finish really by thanking Colin Poole, who has actually sadly left the meeting tonight. He was right. Builders will do absolutely nothing. They will do the least that they can get away with unless we do something. The consultation is a bit like an election. You don't actually have that much power, but at least you do have a little bit of influence. And this consultation and the report that we put into that consultation, or the answers we make, is that little bit of influence. And I think we should take the opportunity to make sure it's the best that we can have it. And I therefore still think we ought to support this motion and make sure that those answers are of a high standard, the highest standard, and reflect the recommendations that we have on the paper. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. I really want to just follow Councillor Morgan's line on this one. We have got a process that's ongoing at the moment, and that is going to go through. And I really, really think it's a good piece of work, and I commend the members of that task panel for doing it, and doing it so diligently, because the work so far has been really, really good. And it should go forward. But we're arguing about nothing here, aren't we? We really, really are. And it's like, as members of the task panel, you can still write to portfolio holders and officers and tell them these exact things. Just write and put forward your point of view, come along to the strategy group, ask for it to be included in that document, and we go back and just tell everyone. And then everything's in there from everybody, isn't it? I mean, it's just like, put your point of view forward, and then we go forward. And then hopefully this council will have a proper strategy to put in place and to wave around to show people that we are serious about this. And along with the good ideas, as Mr. Paul brought today about tree planting, there's loads and loads of good things out there.
Councillor Gilbert.
I think my fellow councillor here has just said what I was going to say, but yes, there's a due process being followed, there's full consultation ongoing, there's various avenues that anybody can input into that consultation. That's the way you get the proper job done.
Councillor Morgan.
I'd also like to add the fact that, of course, before Parliament was dissolved, in the Queen's speech there was quite a bit of other stuff as well, bigger picture going through as well, such as the Environment Bill, the Agriculture Bill, which of course is all about public money for public goods, and also the 25-year environment plan, also the government's pledges around zero carbon by 2050. So a lot of activity. So yes, it is an emergency. We all recognise that. Obviously, we had a motion for it. We can all see the reports coming out, and before COP25, United Nations, etc., World Meteorological Organisation. We're drowning in data. We all know that. This doesn't really add to it at this point in time. No, fully support again Councillor Wesley's point to Councillor Guildford. I think just take it off the table and get the full picture and then move forward more comprehensive that. And hopefully, when the Conservatives get back into government, we'll crack on with those plans and get on with the 25-year environment plan, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. By the way, at NCC and Full Council last month, NCC took action and they will be planting a lot of trees with the contract. So if we need to work together, we are going to go through the unitary. And I think tonight we showed that we wasted half an hour discussing something that is on everybody's mind and everybody wants to move on. And it's with the unitary we need to work together and not to put political points for nothing.
We don't vote, so Councillor Ritchie would like to
Before responding, Chair, am I able to ask a question of the monitoring officer? My understanding is that the Constitution allows the strategy group to respond to consultations on behalf of DDC. Does it, however, rule out the right as the paramount body of the full council to decide how DDC should respond on a consultation?
Council is the absolute body. So if council wanted to choose to respond, you could choose to respond.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is as I expected. There's been a suggestion we should have a proper process and we should put this. The task panel was established by the scrutiny group, the scrutiny improvement committee, and therefore it should report first to the scrutiny improvement committee. Get out your diaries. The scrutiny improvement committee does not meet until the 20-something of January. The closing date for the consultation is, I believe it's the 10th of January. This motion is here because that sort of timetable was not possible. If that sort of timetable had been possible, we would simply have put this as part of a report through the normal channels. It's here because that was not possible, and that is why we were putting it forwards. Now, we say that this is something that we're all committed to. If we're all committed to it, why don't we just say yes and get on with it? I have had emails. I've had emails from Councillor Guilford as a portfolio holder, arguing that this would be almost subverting the right of the strategy group. Yet we can go along and have a discussion with the strategy group. I am an elected member of this council in the same way as Councillor Guilford and everybody else who's sitting here. I don't have a vote though when it goes to the strategy group. Why should we, if we are all in such agreement, look for a situation in which it is only about, 8 or 10 people who are on the strategy group who can actually take part in a vote? The others have come as observers, but we're just sitting there. We do not have a vote in spite of our position as members of this full council. Our opportunity to have a say is only here within the council chamber. And while I can accept that sometimes there may be arguments for delegating to committees as it smooths the procedure, to attempt to do that in a way that undermines the democratic rights of all of us as elected members is just totally wrong, and I find it quite offensive. I'm sorry if I need to disagree with communications I've had from our new council leader, but I do not believe that that is the democratic way of running a council. As I see it, our course can only now be to make sure that the information that we offer that was offered through the amendment that has not been allowed, to make sure that that same information is put forward to members of the strategy group. I'm reasonably confident that they will take a decent decision. The issue that has been in front of us in this debate, however, there have been two issues. One has been the substance of the motion and of the consultation. On that I don't have too many fears. The other is the procedures that we use within this council. Ways of stifling debate. Ways of making sure that those who are not portfolio holders or in special committees don't have a voice. And that is the bit that makes me concerned.
Chairman, I was only going to come back on one point, which is to make that strategy group gets full rounded reports. One of the difficulties with the motion is you've got 3 particulars taken out of a consultation, which needs to be evaluated and assessed in the round. So the purpose of the report, to get all those inputs that we talked about, is to make sure we can present members who are represented there for the council and make a formal consultation response. They've got a full complement of information that we need to make an informed decision on such an important subject.
Chair, I have a right to respond to the debate. The debate seems to have continued beyond after I sat down. I assume I have a right to respond to the monitoring officer's point. Of course, it has. Papers will be sent to members of the strategy group and indeed to others. I'm grateful for being in a position of receiving the papers. That is good. They will be sent something like 10 days before the meeting. This motion has been there 10 days before this meeting. If people wanted to look into the issues and look at the nature of the consultation, there has been adequate opportunity for them to do so.
Councillor Osborne.
Chairman, I've got some things that Councillor just said just a few minutes ago, that he considers it not democratic and everything, that the strategy group should make the decision. I'm sorry, but strategy group, you get papers. You can read the ifs, the buts, the whys, the where, and what you should be doing, could be doing, might be doing, or want to do. The group are probably doing the same sort of thing. How many are there of them? 3 of them? So where's their papers? I don't know. Like the monitoring officer says, those points could be taken out of context, whatever. There's no paperwork with them, nothing. There's nothing for us to decide. At least at Strategy Group, we've got papers and we can make a proper decision on what we see. And it can come to council as well afterwards. Yes, they do have delegated power to do it. But I'm sorry, that's the sensible way to do it. You do it with the proper paperwork and the proper knowledge. You make decisions. You don't make off-hoof decisions at council.
Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, having been chair strategy group for many, many years, and I'm sure the new chairman will do exactly as in the past. All members are invited. All members are allowed to speak if they wish to. All members are allowed to contribute. And one of the things about this is this consultation response goes off a day before it's actually the cut-off date. You have all members who have the full information, Chairman. And this is only part of the response. What's this motion? It's only part of the response. It seems to me to be far better to have a full response where all members who want to participate can be there to participate. And I just say we move it on to that date, and that date will be in time with the new chairman. I'm sure will ensure that goes off on the 10th of January to fit in the deadlines. Thank you, Chairman.
Agreed. So, Councillor Ritchie.
Is this final response?
This is, yes.
Yes. I know it's starting in the evening. I really have, little to add to what I have already said. We will make sure that information gets to the strategy group. But I'm appreciative of the way that in the past that the strategy group has been chaired and has been run. I feel that it has been open in its discussions. But nevertheless, there are only what, 10 people who actually have a vote at a strategy group meeting. I do feel that there are occasions like this when on certain issues that the full council ought to have a say. Now, what has been actually proposed is, from some, is more or less what Councillor Frost proposed in his, what to me is fairly an amendment, to say that rather than taking a decision now, that we feed the information into the strategy group. It seems a perfectly clear and straightforward way of doing it, but we need to, at this stage, I would have liked to see a positive response from the council. I think there has been an amount of game playing, of politicking that is going on around about this. And if we are serious about climate emergency, we have got to do things differently.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go through a vote on the motion. So those for the motion, excuse me, the motion, and those against. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 9, reports and committees. Are you happy to sign those off on Clark? Agreed. Okay, so meeting recommendations, page 87. SG 55-19/01, Malton Library. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this item is to seek approval to help secure the continued provision of Malton Library. Something I feel sure that all members will feel is worthwhile and will support. Recommendation 1 is that a budget of £184,000 is created from the Strategic Infrastructure Fund and repaid from planning obligation funds. So what we're talking about is a short-term funding. I think I described it as strategy rather like a bridging loan. The other recommendation is that an agreement be entered into with Malton Parish Council and the Council will set out in the report. You will see that Malton Library is not on the list to be retained. And this is one way we as a council can make sure the library is kept open. And I'll repeat that. This is one way we can make sure that the library is kept open. This is an area of considerable growth. So there was strong support for this strategy. It supports council's objectives and benefits local community well-being. The money is provided, then reimbursed, and that the proposed arrangements as were outlined are entered into. I'm not going to go on any more on this. I'm therefore going to ask all members to support the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Do you have a second? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say I've been asked by Malton Parish Council to express their thanks to this council for this report and for the offer of the short-term bridging loan to make sure this does happen. I know Malton Parish Council is very much looking forward to going ahead with taking over the library in conjunction with volunteers there, and just thank you very much to the officers for their hard work in getting this going forward. Thank you.
Any of them? So we're all in favour of the recommendation? Agreed. So moving on, SG 61/19/01. Councillor Hill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This item actually is about Section 106 funding for the voluntary sector and community grants. For your information, the Section 106 agreement for 2008 shows that there is £21,245 which has and is currently uncommitted. And as shown, the voluntary sector is regarded as a relevant category. The sector is very concerned, and it is showing that there is an increase in demand regarding future funding. Therefore, it is proposed to transfer the remaining £21,345 to the capital grant budget with the use of these funds restricted, I repeat that, restricted to the voluntary sector. I will refer you to the conclusions of the report, which I hope you all read, which states the Council is a clear supporter of the voluntary and community sector, so utilising this money will help meet the demand for capital grant funding within Daventry and also facilitate wider community benefit. This is something I believe we should all support and would ask each and every one of you to approve the recommendation before you. And by doing so, give your backing and your support to the voluntary and community centre. Thank you.
Councillor Harrington, first. Councillor Morgan, do you wish to speak?
Chairman, thank you. I was going to second it, but Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. So are you all happy with that recommendation? Agreed. And moving on to SG 61/19/02, Alan Hills again, I believe.
Thank you, Chair.
Voluntary and Community Sector Commissioning. I present 3 recommendations in all. Number 1 is that the voluntary and community sector services are commissioned from April 2021 for 2 years at £150,000 per year. 2, the minor amendments to the policy statement commissioning funding for voluntary and community organisations 2019 were approved. I just mentioned it's worth noting that the amendment to the policy was only a change to the date organisations had to apply for commissioning and go through the process using the criteria as currently laid down. 3, the commissioning budget is increased from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2023 to take into account the additional DAC grant of £9,048 per year. The current round of commissioning ends on the 31st of March 2001, which coincides with the new unitary commencing on the 1st of April that year. It's worth noting that if we do nothing, the unitary could commence to charge from that date, and very unlikely they could even say no. This is something we could not support, or I would not even contemplate to happen. There is still a lot of uncertainty regarding what the future brings. What we're trying to do is buy some time and give some continuity to both the voluntary sector and the community sector by looking to prioritise the service areas for a further 2 years from the vesting day of the 1st of April 2021. At the moment, South Northants are uncommitted. The Borough has already extended for a further 2 years from 2021, and we are adopting the same approach. And this, I firmly believe, is the right decision. As for DACT, I have supported DACT over many years. It is highly regarded with and by this council. So I have personally spent much time considering this, and I genuinely believe this is the best course for them. Firstly, it gives them continuity right through to 2023. The opportunity to make plans for the proposed unitary authority, who will probably want to review the situation in 2023. And we are backing this up, and we're fully committed to provide additional grant funding of £9,048, with them paying £1,000 more. We haven't got utopia. We don't have a magic wand. What we are committed to extend by another 2 years, giving them stability and support, not just now, but right up to 2023. And members, what I ask is for your support to enable this council to do just that. Thank you.
Councillor, you have a second? Councillor Miller?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to actually second this proposal. I think it's very important, Chairman, with the uncertainty around local government reorganisation, that our voluntary sector has certainty over the next 2 to 3 years. And therefore, I think it's important that this proposal will give them that certainty up to 2023. Sorry, is that the new leader trying to distract me?
I'm getting stitched up here.
But you did a good job. I just want to say, Chairman, so I fully support this, and I think this council does support the voluntary sector, and this just reaffirms our support for it. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor.
Yeah, it's just something to correct, Chair. Earlier on, there was some sort of dispute that we had with that over the going to commercial rents and the grant. I met with them this week, and they were very grateful to this council for the grant. And I'm very hopeful that those of us who are going towards unitary, that if we do get elected, that we will carry on the baton for ensuring that voluntary agencies like that continually get the support. And I'm grateful for this council for giving us a couple of years whereby we can get all our ducks in a row to try to ensure that that funding continues for these important organisations. Thank you.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Chair. I've read the paper for strategy group on this, and whilst it's laudable in principle, it doesn't specify at all what services are being offered in the paper. And my other concern is that we're trying to extend the services of the community voluntary and community sector, which is fantastic, but we're not actually asking them to provide any performance reporting back on what they're doing, which will then help any defence of those community services in the future. And nothing's in the paper that talks about that. It may have been discussed at strategy, but it's certainly not in the paper on either of those elements. So we're asking for a £70,000 increase per year with no clarity on what the services are in the paper, nor any performance reporting, which would then help them defend their position for the future.
Councillor Hill, would you like to argue?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that if a council's got concerns, it's right to raise it. But when you talk on reporting, I have a lot to do with the voluntary sector, and I challenge anybody who, when I've attended some of their meetings, or when we've gone into what they actually do, I've given you a report. Now the reports are there for all to see. And I would say, quite frankly, if you haven't seen it, that's not down to me. We are aware what our voluntary sector does. There's no doubt about it. They support our communities and they work very hard, and without them no government could exist. So therefore my answer is, I don't know if any of the officers have got any further comments on that, that we do report. I always send reports through. I attend most of their AGMs, most of their meetings. I sit on some of their boards. The reports are there and have been there. I have no doubt that many of you will seen these. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to confirm that any community voluntary sector organisation that commission services from is subject to rigorous reporting regime. We have quarterly figures, annual figures. When we go out to commissioning, we say what money is available for what services we want to provide, and then everything is, anybody who submits to provide that service does so on the basis that we negotiate a performance regime with them. So it is very robust, and some of that information is included in our own performance indicators that come to members through trustee group and scrutiny committee and portfolio holders. So yes, there is a very robust regime of performance monitoring, commissioning and all the other community monitoring services that we provide, whether that's capital or revenue funding.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Hills may have misunderstood my point, and I agree completely with Maria, and I have seen some of that information, but this is about a period when this council will not be here. This is about extending services beyond the life of this council. And I would like to feel that the services beyond the life of this council are not subject to the whim of another body, or another place, what's the term? I'm not quite sure. Another body that would affect the voluntary services in this district, because we just don't make sure that there is stuff in place to provide that legacy for the future and that evidence base. And as somebody who works heavily in the third sector, I know exactly how easy it is for local authorities to withdraw their funding, how easy it is for government to withdraw their funding. And I just want to be reassured that we are helping these voluntary organisations do the best possible job they can while we exist to make sure they're there for the long term.
Councillor Guildford.
Yes, I've got the paper in front of me here, and just reading from it, it talks about that there's an evaluation of each service area to see how far it meets the council corporate priorities and general public support. Following the review, recommendations are made to the Chief Executive to decide which service are commissioned and the values of those commissions. Service specifications are then prepared to take account of current best practice and include realistic performance targets. So there's some targets in there. So what I'm trying to get across here is that in the paper it lists the process that it goes through, the targets it will have to meet, the specification that will be drawn up, and it's for a period of 2 years, which is lengthening the process for these voluntary services.
Okay, so we're all happy with that recommendation?
Agreed.
Moving on to SG 61/19/03 and Councillor Hills.
Me again, yeah. Perhaps I should remain standing, I don't know. There we are. This is the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Strategy 2019 to 2022. The recommendation before you is that the Council adopts the draft countrywide domestic abuse and sexual violence strategy for 2019 to 2022. This is a major concern, not only within the county, but needless to say the country as well. This is a multi-agency approach across all Northamptonshire and confirms the council's zero tolerance to violent, threatening or abusive behaviour. I do not intend to say too much on this. I think it's something that is needed, and therefore I would ask you all for your agreement on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. A few years ago, when I arrived in local politics, I was given the privilege of serving on the police, at that time, the police and crime panel, now police fire and crime panel. And I was astounded to learn that in Northamptonshire we did not have one strategic plan for domestic violence. Bear in mind, two women a week are killed by either a partner or a former partner in this country. Yet we didn't have or the wherewithal to come together as multi-agencies and voluntary agencies to deal with this scourge. It just goes to prove that we, no matter how small our voice or wherever we are, we can influence change. But I want to recognise that my partner in crime, which was Councillor Mary Butch, who was a Labour councillor. She died in July of this year, and I know that on the actual policy it is dedicated to her for her tireless work in fighting for the rights of domestic violence victims to be kept protected and to ensure that the enforcement agencies rightly pursue and prosecute those responsible for that heinous crime. I'm grateful for people like Councillor Butcher that she had such gusto and verve in fighting her cause. And I think this is the type of policies that we should have, where we all come together, both voluntary and statutory, to actually protect vulnerable women from being abused and murdered by perpetrators and by their partners and former partners. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we're happy with that recommendation? Apologies, Wendy.
Sorry. Yeah, I welcome this policy as well, and I hope that funding will be put into the women's refuges as well, because obviously a lot of those have become under threat, and obviously that is a place where women with children flee because they do fear for their lives. And I know I was very concerned to see last year that a lot of the funding was being cut, so need to do everything we can to make sure that they are available and keep being funded.
Yes, in domestic violence we spoke always about women, but some men, and it's a lot of stigma. A lot of men do not want to say that they are, and in fact they are the ones who are ignored by all. And to be a man and to go and say I have been abused, it's a much more difficult situation. So I would say it's not just women, it's men and women. Thank you.
So once again, are we happy with that recommendation? Very. Move on to SG 61/19/04. Councillor Hills. Thank you.
This is to seek approval of the business plan for the new leisure centre at Malton, and it details the purchase of the Chris Moody Centre. This product has been on the council's wish list for a very long period. It's something we are committed to do. There are 7 recommendations in all, and I will talk about the main points. They are that the business plan is approved, capital budget is reduced to 8,500,000 and the SLM be appointed to run both centres. And I'm pleased to note that SLM recently won an award for their running of the leisure centre, and that the other thing is that the capital programme be amended to include recurring capital investment of £30,000 per annum over the periods 22-23, 23-24 and 24-25. Next, I'd like to refer you to the purchase of the Community Centre. Please note that this will be subject to planning permission, changing the use to a public leisure centre, with a target date of 2024 then. Also note, the business plan is appended, as it contains sensitive commercial information and is in summary form, and that engagement with current users is ongoing. Part of this is and has been the discussions with Northampton Swimming Club. We must and we need to strike a balance regarding usage. And we can also look at whether the grant system is possible. This project fulfills the Council's sports facility investment strategy, which includes our aim of increasing physical activity, and I recently gave you a report on C Active, B Active, and it actually supports that. C Active, B Active and tackling obesity. And that the Council will continue to look after the centre when the purchase has been completed. This is also very much us as a Council leaving a worthwhile legacy and creating certainty for everyone. I was very pleased that strategy this received unanimous approval, and I would now ask full Council to do the same. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak? Okay, so Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a question? Just on usage. Sorry if I've missed this. Is it going into consultation about how it will be used and how people pay and how people actually use the centre? I mean, because I'm sort of thinking like, are the two leisure centres going to be one leisure centre with an overarching umbrella? So if you happen to be over on the Malton side, you can go and use it. On the Daventry side, you can go and use it.
I refer to Simon Brown on that one. Well, I'm not sure.
Chairman, the proposal is, as the papers show, sports and leisure management will run both sites, actually under two contracts for legal reasons, but I would expect someone to have membership at Daventry also to be as multi-land by sports.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're happy with that recommendation?
Agreed.
So moving on to SG 61/19/05.
Last one.
Somebody said the last one, you're right, it is the last one. What we have before us actually is another business plan. This is regarding the country park improvement programme. This is that the business plan for the refurbishment programme be approved. This is known as our jewel in the crown. Visitors to the park have increased by 25%, and an additional 3,772 car parking tickets were purchased between April 2019 and September 2019. And this compares very favourably with the same period in 2018. It's worth noting that any income achieved from all this goes back into maintaining this excellent facility. Our country park has won numerous Green Flag Awards. The criteria and the bar is raised each year. With the increase in numbers, we need to ensure the park continues to be fit for purpose. And that means upgrading and improving the facilities. When the improvements are completed, which will include the upgrades to the cafeteria and the toilets, I believe the facilities will be second to none. And this will benefit all users of the park, not just now, but in the future. Once again, leaving a legacy when the District Council is no longer in existence. I I therefore ask you all, and I mean all, to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, one like that, I mean, how could you refuse it? And then he told us to do it. So I support this fully and give him my second. Thank you.
Your second, yes. Councillor Roberts? Yes, seconded.
Chair, I seconded that case.
Councillor Wesley?
I was just going to say, I'm really, really pleased that the country park is actually being looked after. Now, the improvements done there it's just so much better than it was. But I would just like to say, can we just ensure that we keep an eye on the environmental side, like the tree planting and everything else. It is a really, really good facility to use, but it does also have a secondary, which is its environmental credentials. And I know that's all part of the Green Lane, I know it's part of everything else, but let's just keep at it because it is a definite improvement.
So are you happy to run with that recommendation?
Agreed.
So SG 63/19/01, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm standing in for Councillor Chandler this evening, who's unable to be with us, and I don't pretend to have anything like his knowledge on this subject. However, I will just start off with an apology to members because the recommendation says that the proposed urban development scheme as appended to the report, that it is of course appended to the strategy group report, not tonight's report. However, this is essentially a tidying up exercise as a consequence of a longer examination period. The local development scheme needs to be updated. However, the scope of the plan does remain unaffected, and I hope that, given that the scheme previously had member support, it will continue to do so tonight.
Can we have a second? Councillor James, do you wish to speak?
I wouldn't say it's just a technical point. It's a program to do. That's fine.
So we're happy with that recommendation?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to SG 63/19/03, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 5 recommendations before members on this one. First being that the approach to determining applications for neighbourhood areas is rescinded. This is because it's been superseded by new regulations from government. Secondly, that the Executive Director for Business is granted authority to approve applications for neighbourhood areas that don't correspond to the parish boundary. My understanding is that this will always be done in collaboration with parish councils. Thirdly, that the approach to procuring a framework for neighbourhood planning services agreed in May 2012 is rescinded. We've had very limited take-up on this front, and other providers are able to provide this service these days. Fourthly, that charges for locality planning agreed in October 2011 cease to be applied. I understand that we've only been obtaining an income of about £165 per annum from this, so it's largely superfluous now. And lastly, that the approach to the Council's Brownfield Register agreed in October 2017 be revised. Such applications will be made with open invitation on the Council's website and then determined by the Planning Committee. Councillor Chancellor. Sorry, turn the page, members. There is one last recommendation that the Executive Director for Business be authorised to carry out the annual review of the register and to remove land from it which no longer fulfil to protect for inclusion. As Councillor Chandler so ably informed me on the night of strategy group, the register is a public document. It can be easily found on the Council's website. We only have a handful of brownfield sites within the district. They amount, the cumulative total is only approximately 4 to 5 hectares, which I believe is no more than about half a dozen football pitches in size. So we are limited in our brownfield land here in Daventry district. But I hope the report has member support.
Councillor, do you have a second? Councillor James?
Just to say, it's all being said, but it's really a matter of making things more efficient and more effective.
So we happy with that recommendation?
Agreed.
So moving on to SG 64/19/01, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very brief document, of course, and it's our duty. We're required to present this paper. It basically speaks of, obviously, we're in times of uncertainty, particularly low interest rates, etc., and we have to look after the money affordably. There's a table when you refer back to the strategy document, which recognises we have £67 million that we look after, and particularly for new members. Councillor Harrington Carter, for instance, that is not our money. Most members are aware of us saying this now because sometimes people get a bit excited and think they can spend a lot. Councillor Hills obviously has been on a bit of a spending spree this evening, but notwithstanding that, the good news in this particular report is that over the period, the interim, so 6 months into the year, we actually made £67,000 more interest than we expected to, which obviously goes into the coffers, and that's quite frankly partly down to good management from Section 151 officer, etc., and the investment strategy we have. And really, Chair, that's simply to note that report. Thank you.
Thank you. Another second?
Second.
Councillor Shepherd, wish to say anything?
No.
Okay, we're happy with that recommendation?
Agree.
Recommendations, SG64/19/02. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Before you get to the papers with the recommendations on this evening, members would have noticed page 83 and 85 actually, well 83 through 85. I've got some amendments on. This is because in the original papers on strategy there was a couple of best terms of schoolboy errors in the calculations. So the correct papers are there before you, but the main point is, I'd like to just walk on a couple through these. I'm not going to read out the list exhaustively. I'm sure you won't find it, but I will point out a couple of those in due course, okay? So the ones I'd like to point out from the papers this evening, particularly noteworthy, is item number 3, which is where we've got the revised papers in the front, which are actually less generous in actual fact than the ones at the beginning, in terms of those numbers. And I'd like to point out number 7 on the list, which talks about the budget recommendations of an extra £866,000 going in towards the local government reorganisation project. Obviously that's bringing that sum of money up now. Now of course, as we stand here and support this paper this evening, it must be noted that because we haven't had the structural change orders yet, because obviously the general election hiatus, etc., that money we're putting forward, and obviously money we've spent already is at risk. But the whole medium-term financial plan is written within the spirit and knowledge that it's both business as usual and also looking forward to challenges and local government reorganisation, etc. So I wanted to point that out because that's very important. The other very important point out is in the medium-term financial plan we also have a deterioration in our finances, assuming we're still here, and a large part of that of course is because of the new homes bonus potential, which we may well decrease over the term of the NTFP by actually the sum of quite staggering £10.393 million, and therefore that does have a serious impact on us, and therefore all the investment we've seen this evening will obviously have to give our community a benefit and give us the objectives which we're looking for. Finally, there's one other point which is regarding the council tax. Obviously going to apply to the year now, we'll start looking at that, and we've set that as a £5 proposal now. So with that, Chair, and without reading out all the numbers there, we had a good discussion of strategy and pointed out the 2 amending papers. Thank you.
Chairman, yes, if I may say a couple of words as well. Clearly the new administration is not without a sense of humour. I was specifically asked by the leader to second these 2 recommendations, knowing as he does my great affection for this particular resources portfolio. I do certainly second the recommendations, subject to one condition, which I'm sure is, I can see he's nodding his head from a secondary position. Councillor Morgan will certainly agree with the proposal I have to make. Some officers and members will know I've been making quite a nuisance of myself for the last 6 months or so on a tiny aspect of SIL. And it's because my particular ward, comprising the villages of Harleston and Boughton, is particularly affected by an insidious aspect of SIL called the SIL cap. The SIL cap applies very hard where you have a largish development in a small village that does not have a neighbourhood plan. And that is the case in both Boughton with 1,050 houses and in Harston with 2,500 over Harston and Harpole areas. In researching and having these discussions about the applications, incidentally, if there are any other members who have that sort of situation in their parishes, I don't think there are actually. I suspect that you do have. There's one here. Good. Byfield as well. Excellent. Well, I'm sure we can have some sort of discussions about that. But my suggestion and request to Councillor Morgan, who has been privy to my discussions, is that he agrees to organise a meeting with officers and myself, and possibly one or two others who might be interested, in the new year. There's no great urgency, in the 2 or 3 months of the new year, to look at the way in which we deal with SIL in relation to those particular parishes. I have some personal recommendations of how we can improve communications parishes also in that respect. And I'm sure that we can improve the situation modestly by that sort of dialogue amongst those of us who are particularly concerned about that point. Subject to that, and he's nodding his head, I second the motion.
Thank you. It's nice to have it on other conditions. Actually, there's nothing scary in this role than having Councillor Shepherd's hand, because he obviously being the previous owner of this role, I know he's very clever, very good at this. And but actually, I fully support that. In fact, I was meant to be attending the meeting previously, but I got called away to speak at a conference in London. And I'd certainly welcome the opportunity, not least actually, because I think it's good for all of us to really understand the issue. And of course, I very early this morning kicked an email around as well to say let's have a meeting. I'd actually be very enthused to get to the bottom of this topic. So absolutely, thank you for Councillor Shepherd's support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about what parishes in my ward as well. I think Overston probably ticks that box as well, so we'd be happy to join in with the proposed meeting there as well.
Chair, if you're going to continue this debate around Boughton and Sill, then I have to declare an interest and I'll probably need to leave the room. If you're not going to continue that debate, I'll stay in the room.
Okay, we'll stick to the items we've got on the hearing.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say that we've promoted neighbourhood plans actually for very good reasons across the district, and where they have taken place often brings communities together. And I think the point you're making, John, is if you don't have one, you actually lose out when the development does come along. So I'd always say to the communities, really look at them very seriously. We've got quite a number now, I'm not sure how many there are. It's Maria here. You might know how many neighbourhood plans we have across the district. Fairly substantial. 15 have been through the system. 15 through the system. But what it does bring communities together to actually form what they want for their future. And when you think about development, it's often going to come to places. And I think the key thing here is to maximise the housing or the community benefit out of these developments. And one way of doing that is to make sure you have a neighbourhood plan. Otherwise, as John Shepherd's highlighted tonight, you have some issues that are raised. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have that recommendation.
Agreed.
Item 11, scheduled council committee meeting. So item 11, so we need a proposer in a second, please.
I'm happy to propose.
You all agree? Item 12, membership. Okay, so we'll have this one.
Thank you, Chairman. There's been some adjustments to the membership pages following the recent by-election, and also taking into account the leading of the Conservative group by Councillor McBride, so showing before that. The changes are shown on page 95 of the papers, I think it may be of benefit just to run through those. It's not terribly clear on the paper. So on strategy group, we have Councillor Lomax replacing Councillor Darts. On scrutiny improvements, we have Councillor Frost and Councillor Hamilton Carter replacing Councillor Amy Howard and one vacant post. On corporate governance committee, we have Councillor Hamilton Carter and Councillor James replacing Councillor Lomax and Councillor Micklewright. And on appeals and standards committee, we have Councillor Harris replacing Councillor Randall. And Chairman, if I may, on page 96, we've actually had a further request for the change from the legal council, which came after the papers were produced, and that is in respect of the local government reorganisation group, where Councillor Brown will replace Councillor Micklewright.
Thank you. So we could have a proposal and a second on that.
I'd like to propose.
Let's take that, Chairman, but also just to note that I believe that in future, where the councillors' names correspond to a female councillor, I would actually like to see the removal of the title. We don't refer to male councillors as Councillor Mr. Van. I see no reason why we should be referring to female councillors with their title of Ms or Mrs or whatever it may be. It may not be for me as a man to say that, but I do feel that there's a discrepancy there. I'd certainly like to liaise with female members of the council if they agree.
So are we in agreement with that?
I'm happy with that.
So 13, outside coffee, replaced in body. 0 point, improving housing and environment, health portfolio holder, the Futures Housing Group Insight Committee, replacing Councillor Orr. Okay. Just noted there, so we agree on that?
Agreed.
Okay, and we now move on to item 14, urgent business, which we have some. We will refer to officers on the
Okay, thank you, Chairman. We've had a spate of resignations at Old Parish Council, which has left the council incorrect and therefore unable to operate. This council has access to powers through the Local Government Act 1972. In such circumstances, to appoint temporary members to the parish council. We've been working with the parish clerk and with NCALC to try and identify some suitable candidates. I've heard today that there are some suitable candidates, but not yet confirmed. But we believe we found some, and we therefore, in order to make the appointment, we require the council delegates authority to the chief exec to make an order to make those appointments. Chairman.
Thank you. So are we agreed to delegate that power to the chief exec?
Agreed.
So we're looking for a proposal.
Yes, Joe, just to say also that although she can't be here tonight, Councillor Leslie Warner, who's the local ward member, fully supports the proposals in front of us, and hopefully Old Parish Council can come forward very soon in the future.
So we agree with that? Agreed. So just to draw the meeting to a close, just one thing I missed from my announcements at the beginning. I have a speech service on the 2nd of February in Whedon Church, and I would really like you all to attend if possibly can. It's a great opportunity to show off our district to other councils, etc., and to meet some people that you may well be meeting in the future should the union come together as well. It's going to be a good and very interesting thing. It's been a difference, so I do hope you all will come along and support us at 11 o'clock on the 2nd of February. It's actually going to be taking guests down to the church from Weedon Depot because we have a challenge parking, so we will use getting to that, and then the reception will be in Weedon Depot afterwards. So that's the 2nd of February, 11 a.m. We'll get more I'm sure. So, to draw conclusions, to draw close, we have mince pies and mulled wine and soft drinks, which is room 3. And if you can find Secretary, we'll go on.